All right, moving on. We will now go to our next application, which is 109 East 42nd Street. This is the Grand Hyatt Commodore Hotel, and it is the review of the scope of work for the Grand Hyatt redevelopment located in the Greater East Midtown Special District. So I think we have a full team of applicants with us tonight for this very important project. I will, before we go into the presentation, I just want to frame what we're looking at. This is the scope of work. We will be discussing the scope and only the scope of the environmental impact statement that will be prepared for the review of this particular development. Okay, so I will explain more thoroughly what that means, but I want everybody to keep that in mind, from the get-go as we listen to the proposal. There will be an opportunity to fully comment on the project itself, its merits, whether we like it, we don't like it, is very important. But tonight, really what we need to focus on is whether the impacts of this development are properly assessed. All right, so with that being said, I will turn the floor to the applicants for this project.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you for having us. My name is Michael Rem. I'm the Development Project Executive from RXR Realty, and we're excited to be here tonight to discuss Project Commodore. I'm also joined by my friend and partner, John McMillan from TF Cornerstone, who you'll hear from shortly. We also have other members from our project team who can help answer questions. That includes David Karnofsky from Fried Frank, Luke Bridle from SOM, and Nancy Doon from VHB. And I just want to echo, thank you, Leila, for pointing it out. This is an advanced briefing on the project, which is being held prior to the public scoping hearing, which is scheduled for December 21st. And this is for the purpose of commenting on the draft scope of work. So we'll be back to discuss the building itself early next year, and of course the project as well.
Thank you.
So on slide 2, we've got quite a bit of content to cover today, so I'll keep these introduction slides short. But just in looking at the table of contents, we'll start with a brief introduction of the project team, and then we'll review the site history and the existing conditions. We'll then turn our attention to the proposed project by reviewing our goals and guiding principles. And then John will take you through a bit of the proposed project, mostly focusing on improvements to the public realm. And then since tonight's presentation is really looking forward to that scoping hearing later this month, we'll touch a bit on the proposed land use actions and look forward to the next steps. And finally, of course, we'll leave time for questions and answers. RXR is a New York City-based vertically integrated real estate firm, and we've got a long history in New York City and a commitment to the city's future. Our operational ethos is doing good and doing well means doing better. And that really leads us to develop strong partnerships and support the communities where we work. We bring deep experience developing projects in partnership with public entities, and this includes Pier 57, which is a mixed-use development in Hudson River Park, and that's got extensive public open space. And the Willoughby, the lights just went off in my room, and the Willoughby, which is a residential development on Long Island University's campus that includes upgrades to collegiate sports facilities. We also have a significant presence in Community Board 5, with many of the properties pictured below falling into your district. John, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself and TF Cornerstone?
Yeah, so I'm John McMillan with TF Cornerstone, and we are a large but private family-owned company. We've been around for 50 years. We have a very long-term, multi-generational investment horizon. We call that sort of patient capital. Our bread and butter seems to be very large-scale public-private sector partnerships. We did a lot of work at Battery Park City, Queens West, which you can see here on the lower right-hand corner. We did all of that. We're now building about 850 affordable units at Hunters Point South. We're doing 2 buildings at Atlantic Yards in downtown Brooklyn, and even Carnegie Hall, which is sort of our trophy office building, is on a lease with New York City. We don't have a large presence in Community Board 5. I would say the nearest thing to you guys was a rezoning that we did with Board 4, way west on 57th Street over at the highway. And that was probably the first rezoning that came through in the de Blasio administration. Next.
So you're probably familiar with this site, but just as a reminder, the site is at the current Grand Hyatt, and it's bounded by Lexington Avenue to the east, 42nd Street to the south, the Park Avenue Viaduct to the west, and of course our neighbor to the north is Grand Central Market. And the interesting thing about this site is the 456 subway line that actually runs diagonally below it. And I can't stress, this is of such tremendous importance that it's been a major factor in almost all of the decision-making on this project, from the improvements to the transit system, to the location of the public open space, and of course, obviously, the architecture, the engineering, and the construction of the building itself. So on the next slide, we'll take a closer look at the existing conditions, and we notice that the public realm and the pedestrian experience in the vicinity of this project really leave plenty of room for improvement and lessons learned. So we're happy to report that we plan on demolishing Donald Trump's first foray into Manhattan real estate and building a new tower from scratch. So here are some of the characteristics that we'll try to improve. Everyone knows how crowded these sidewalks are and how busy the subway entrances can become. And on 42nd Street, that cantilevered restaurant really has kind of an imposing presence that blocks views of Grand Central Terminal beyond. And the entrances from Lexington to the subway and Grand Central Terminal, those are sometimes hard to locate for visitors, and then they spill directly out onto the sidewalk. So we see all these as an opportunity to right these wrongs.
Yeah, and one thing I would point out, which you can see in these pictures, that's characteristic of its site and the relationship to the terminal is that it's continuous on the ground level. So we are a continuation of the terminal across the ground level, but on the second level, it pulls away and we have the space between the terminal and our building of the viaduct. And that very much influences how we treat the ground level and how we treat the second level and how we deal with public circulation and open space, which you'll see later.
So on the next slide, you'll see the redevelopment of this project really reflects the heart and soul of the ideals that are expressed during the rezoning process. And we really want to give the community board a lot of credit. You guys spent an enormous amount of effort getting Greater East Midtown right, and we've taken these ideals to heart with a really particular focus on integrating development with our transit improvements and public open space. And you had the foresight to realize that the importance of new high quality office space in Midtown, which is even more important in the age of COVID, because we all know the fact is that most companies move their offices from time to time. And when they move, they'll look for the best available option. And we want that option to be in East Midtown. Another guiding principle for us has been to improve the streetscape and the transit experience. And this is really the focus of what John will speak about, but I thought that this was an interesting graphic that expresses how we've embraced that connectivity with the terminal and the surrounding neighborhood. So you'll see this intense connectivity on 4 different levels: above grade in the new public open spaces, at grade with new sight lines and improved sidewalks, 1 level below grade with better access to the subway, and even further underground with a new connection between commuter rail lines and the subway. So the project itself is about 2.2 million zoning square feet, of which about 1.9 will be devoted to office space, with most of the balance being devoted to a new 500-room hotel. There will be about 12,000 square feet of retail on the project, and that includes the MTA-controlled retail within Grand Central Terminal itself. And there'll also be significant public realm improvements, including subway and mass transit improvements, publicly accessible open space, and really to an extent that far exceeds the 10,000 square feet that's required by zoning. So on the next slide, in seeking land use approvals for this project, we're really drawing on that framework that was established during the Greater East Midtown rezoning process. So just briefly, we're going to actually use the transit improvement and public concourse special permits that you're already familiar with, but we're going to alter how we access them. In Lot 30, which is the current Grand Hyatt, and Grand Central Terminal will act as a single qualifying site, as well as we're going to be making modifications to the floor area, height and setback, street wall continuity, and other district plan elements, as well as the publicly accessible open space regulations. And of course, we'll seek a special permit for the hotel use too. We're also making zoning text amendments to those existing special permits that I discussed in the first bullet. We're reducing the number of required bicycle parking spaces from 286 to about 100 spaces, which we think makes sense given that the building's sitting on top of one of the biggest transportation hubs in the country. And lastly, this will be city-owned property, so another land use action will deal with the amendment of that lease and extending the ground lease.
Okay, so we're now going to walk you through some of our major proposed changes to the site. We have been working with the MTA for more than a year, so all of this has been agreed to with the MTA. This is a ground plan of our site combined with Grand Central. Grand Central is to the left of the yellow section, and then we're on the right, and our section is outlined in red here. So you can see how kind of intricately connected our site is with Grand Central on the ground level, and how many of the public spaces of Grand Central kind of pass right through our site, like the Lexington Passage. And then the three major subway entrances to the 42nd Street station kind of cut into our site. The one at 42nd Street, the one off the Lexington Passage, and then the one over on Lexington Avenue. So these are the major areas that we're going to be making improvements to, which we're about to present to you. So the next slide shows our proposed changes to the ground floor. And you can see that one of the major moves that we're making here is we are introducing a new transit hall that runs all along the western edge of our site, so that it sort of anchors the eastern edge of the Grand Central Terminal complex. So it's designed very much to read as part of the Grand Central public realm. You'll never realize it's part of our building. It's going to read as part of the Grand Central complex. And combined with that is just below that where it says expanded subway entrance. That's a completely reconfigured entrance to the 42nd Street subway. We've created kind of an at-grade foyer for the subway below, where we've brought all the turnstiles that are now underneath in the mezzanine level, we've brought them up to the grade level. We've created a new entrance from 42nd Street into this subway station so that you don't have to go through the 42nd Street passage. And then we've added new stairs and elevators, and I'll go through this in more detail a little later. Then we've greatly improved the Lexington Passage by nearly doubling its height. Otherwise, it will be located more or less where it is today. And we've relocated the the entrance on Lexington Avenue. We've had to relocate it because we're setting our building back 5 feet. And so we couldn't leave the existing subway entrance where it is. So we took advantage of that opportunity and relocated it in a way that aligns with the station below. As Michael mentioned, the subway station is at a 45-degree angle with this building. So now this subway station will bring you down into the station directly on access with the station below. Okay, next. So this is a view of the 42nd Street Passage looking south towards 42nd Street. And you can see at the end that there are 3 entrances there. Today, there are only 2, and the one on the left is occupied by an ADA elevator that takes you down to the subway. We will be relocating that elevator and restoring this entrance to its original function. And then off to the left, you can begin to see the new spaces that we're creating. You can see the subway turnstiles there. That's the new subway foyer entrance. And then more towards this side, you're beginning to lead into the new transit hall that we're creating. Next slide. Now we're kind of in this new transit hall looking at the new entrance to the subway station. So again, you can see all the turnstiles are up here at grade. You can see through those turnstiles, and we've now created kind of this new aperture into this subway entrance so that you can enter directly from 42nd Street. But this is also bringing, natural daylight into this entrance and to the staircases going down below. And then you can see in this transit hall, it begins to have openings that align with spaces in Grand Central Terminal. And then you can see that sort of light is coming in from above. If we go to the next slide, you can see that we've been able to create skylights into this transit hall that create sort of strategically positioned views of the eastern facade of Grand Central Terminal. And then again, the openings into this transit hall are aligned with things like the ramp that take you down to the Oyster Bar or to the Vanderbilt Hall, which you can see through here. Okay, next slide. And then this is a plan of the existing conditions of the mezzanine below, which is, utterly inscrutable to anyone but the most avid transit aficionado. And that is because of all this green stuff, which is sort of the supporting structure of the Hyatt above. And the reason it's all there is because the Hyatt was built on the grid of the street system above, whereas this subway station was built at a 45-degree angle to that. So you need all these green girders that are sort of transferring the structure of the Hyatt from one grid to the other grid. So because we're removing the Hyatt above, we have the opportunity of removing all of this structure in here, which is kind of impeding legibility, visual access, and circulation through the station. So in the next slide, this is the proposed changes to the mezzanine below. You can see all the green stuff disappears, and suddenly you can see from one end of the station to the other. Suddenly the circulation is much clearer and more legible, more evenly distributed. So now I want to just kind of quickly walk you through all the subway entrance changes. So if you start over at the left-hand side, at the corner of the red box, that is the existing escalator coming down from above. That won't really change. That stays more or less where it is today. Then to the right of that is a slightly repositioned but much enlarged staircase coming down, close to where it is today. And then to the right of that big oddly shaped square thing, that's one of the two mega columns that are coming down and bringing the structure of the tower through the station down to bedrock. There are only two places along the south side of this building on 42nd Street where we can bring structure through the terminal without affecting the subway station. The other one is over at the corner on Lexington Avenue. So then just to the right of that mega column is a new staircase that we are introducing and the new ADA elevator down to the mezzanine. And you can notice that this new staircase is at a completely different angle from the old staircase. And the reason for this is that it brings you down in a much more kind of logical orientation to the mezzanine below. So, you enter the mezzanine at a perpendicular angle to it. And you're much more in the middle of the mezzanine, and that allows sort of pedestrian traffic to be more evenly distributed throughout the station and kind of among all of the existing staircases. You can see how the old staircase kind of takes you to one end of the station and orients you away from all of these staircases. And the throughput of this station, the number of trains that can pass through this station, is a critical issue for the MTA, and that can be greatly improved by more evenly distributing people to the staircases. You couldn't really have more staircases going down to the tracks. It's just that people aren't using them evenly. And so the point of this new staircase is to get people more evenly distributed among all the staircases. And then all the way at the far right end, you can see the new staircase coming down from Lexington Avenue in an orientation that is, completely legible to the orientation of the mezzanine, and also in a way that brings light coming in from Lexington Avenue. Okay, I think that's everything on this slide. Then the Lexington Passage, this is a cross-section of the Lexington Passage looking to the south. And the red line cutting through there is the existing ceiling height. So we are going to be able to almost double the height in the Lexington Passage for much of its length, and create a much grander, more visible, light-filled entrance on Lexington Avenue. And then in the middle here, where you see the 4, 5, 6 circles, that's the existing entrance down to the subway, which will remain unchanged. And then just to the right of that is a new bank of escalators that will take people up from the Lexington Passage to our office building. So this is one of those office buildings where the office lobby has to be on the second floor. Because of all this transit stuff going on the first floor, we are not able to bring the elevator pits below grade. And so the entire lobby is up on the second level. And we are expecting that approximately half of the building's tenants will use this elevator bank here, and the other half will use the front door, which will be on 42nd Street. And then you can also, you're just starting to get sort of peaks of the public realm that we're going to be proposing above here. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it does kind of circle the building in 360 degrees on a couple of levels. Okay, next slide. Now we're out on Lexington Avenue, and you can see starting all the way to the right is the stone entrance to the existing Grand Central Market. And then just to the left of that is the new entrance to the Lexington Passageway, and kind of nestled in there is a new elevator that's going to take you up to a new public realm that we're creating. And then just to the left of that is a new staircase that will take you up to that public realm. And then just to the left of that is the new entrance to the subway station that we're creating. I think the next slide will give you a better view of that. So you can see how this is kind of orienting you so that when you go down to the subway station, you're in line with the station itself. You can also see in this image one of the mega columns coming down behind the staircase that's taking people up to the public realm. And if we could just go back, Luke, to the previous image, I just want to point out once more. So what you're seeing above all of this on the second level is one of the terraces that we're creating. This is the 10,000 square feet of required open space, but we've greatly expanded on that, as you'll see in upcoming images. Okay, Luke.
And John, we should just also mention the sidewalk widening here on Lexington.
Yeah,
well.
And so the sidewalk on Lexington has been expanded by, I think, 5 feet. And then you can also see there's a waiting area for the ADA elevator and it's a protected waiting area for the ADA elevator taking you downstairs. Okay, and then by the way, to the left of that was the entrance to the hotel. The Grand Hyatt is going to be rebuilt, and we will be putting that at the very top of the building, and it will be the highest hotel in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so this is kind of an expanded view of all of this, and kind of our last major transit improvement. We've sort of wandered way off the site and have found a way to make a connection to the East Side access all the way over at 1 Vanderbilt, and also to the Metro North commuter lines coming in. So what we have been able to do is find a way to bring those commuters sort of underneath the terminal and through to the 4, 5, 6 mezzanine level, so that those commuters don't have to kind of go up through the terminal and then back down through the individual subway entrances. And then the way we've been able to do that is we've taken advantage of kind of an old turnaround track for Metro North, that's the curved thing, and then kind of some underutilized space running under the terminal, under the Grand Central Terminal itself. And so both of those come through, connect, and then come through to the mezzanine level of the 4, 5, 6 train. So this takes approximately 4,000 commuters out of just per hour, peak rush hour, just out of the 42nd Street subway entrance, because they're not having to go up through the terminal and then down through that station. They're able to make a direct link underneath. And then you can kind of see over on the right how the other subway entrance from Lexington is also coming in. And that has opened up all kinds of new staircases over there, which are currently, completely hidden and very much inaccessible. And again, you can see in this image, the two places along 42nd Street, those two gray shapes, those are the structural landings for the site. And so you can see, how little area we have to bring the structure down for the project. Okay. Now, so this is the second level of the project, and you can now see that we have found a way to create an outdoor public realm here. And this is something, so it's surrounding the site on all sides. So we found a way to literally set the building back, not on the first level where we need all of the space to create all of the connections we just talked about. So we've set it back on the second level in a way that creates all of this open space. And this was an idea that came to us very early on in the project when we met with Gail Brewer, and she happened to have given this a lot of thought, and she had this suggestion, and we took it and ran with it and ultimately decided that it was a wonderful idea, because it's a way of creating a public realm that's somewhat removed from the congestion of 42nd Street and Lexington Avenue, but yet it's very much connected to the urban experience. It allows you to sort of look down on the busyness of the street around you. And by the way, this site is completely surrounded by landmarks on all sides. So it's really kind of a spectacular urban setting. And we see this very much as a platform from which you can just view the spectacular city around you. And we think that it will be a variety of experiences. We call the terrace closest to Grand Central Terminal, the Grand Central Terrace. And really what that's about is just being able to view Grand Central Terminal from the first time from this perspective. You don't really get to see the eastern facade of Grand Central, and except when you're whizzing by in a car on the viaduct. So that's kind of what this particular terrace is about. You can also see the skylights that are going down to the new transit hall, which is directly underneath the space. And then over on the Lexington Avenue side, that's a slightly larger terrace that we hope to be able to program a little more intensively, maybe with some restaurants, some casual dining, F&B, art, water features, that sort of thing. And then on the north side is another terrace that we call the Graybar Terrace, that we're hoping to kind of program with some individual smaller buildings. I think if we go to the next slide, you can get a slightly better perspective on that. For example, we are hoping to do some kind of a restaurant up there at the upper left-hand corner, that glass building. I'm sorry, on the right side, Lou. That hopefully will be some kind of a restaurant. So that's where people can come up from Lexington Avenue. Kind of a two-story thing with public seating both on the lower level and on the upper level, and then some kind of a retail pavilion over on the other end as well, to make sure that we are able to activate all of these spaces as much as possible, We very much want these spaces to be used by both the office tenants. It's going to be a sizable office population here, as well as the public. But the main way that you get to these spaces are through these huge grand staircases that come down to 42nd Street, right at the middle of the site, right at the front door to our site. So these staircases, these civic staircases, very much are going to be defining the front door of this building. They couldn't be kind of more prominently placed. So we really do feel that the public, they're going to be very welcoming to the public. We are trying to design them so that they are spatial experiences in and of themselves. We are working with field operations as the landscape architect for this project. They did the High Line, so we think they're going to be able to bring a lot of value to these elevated spaces. And then you can kind of see we've got little elevators strategically located in lots of places to make sure that all of these spaces are very much accessible for everybody. And I think next, Michael, is back to you. Michael?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So I get the fun job of explaining the EIS framework, which it's not always super intuitive. So really what we're comparing here is what's called the no action condition, which is a building that we could construct without any of these discretionary actions that we're here to discuss today, against the with action condition, which is the building that we could construct with all of these land use actions that we described earlier. So importantly, the no action condition, it isn't the existing building, it's the building that could be built without any discretionary actions. And another item to note is that the figures you see here on the right side of the page, those aren't building designs or proposals. We'll be back with those soon. They're just a zoning envelope within which our building will ultimately need to fit. So lastly, on the next slide for next steps, a public scoping hearing will be held on December 21st at 2 p.m. The documents for that hearing are all available for download at that web link there. And I know it's long, so you can just Google NYC DCP Project Commodore and it'll pop right up. You can watch or participate in the meeting using the second web link, which you can also find at the first one. And of course, we'll return shortly to present the building design, and we'll do that in connection with an application that we'll be making to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, seeking a report on the harmonious relationship between our building and Grand Central Terminal. So with that, I think that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Very dense proposal that you're bringing to us. Let's go to questions from members of the committee. Dave Achilles, go ahead.
Yes, I believe it's page 23, where you have the red dotted outline showing the space. I'm sorry, 22, page 22. The red dots here on your area, that shows where it's just surrounding the blue area. This shows the area that the terrace will be, I assume. The dotted red line that is out almost to the street level, that is the actual area where the building will eventually rise to, because it looks like the building is bowl-shaped and expanding out into the airspace. From if you look at the drawing on page 20, on page 18 and page 19, those paintings, it looks like the building is expanding out over into the airspace. Is that what's happening there?
That's correct. As I mentioned, the building sort of sets back at these lower levels and expands out as it rises. And that's how we've been able to create these open spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and really in kind of pulling the building in at those edges, sorry, at the lower levels, we're able to expand those sight lines of Grand Central Terminal and the Chrysler Building and all these other great landmarks as well.
Just
Thank
to
you.
clarify though, this piece of the red line that you were referring to is not part of the building. That's the extent of the plaza spaces above. The building line would be back along this edge.
Okay, thank you. Nick, next question.
Thank you, Leila. At the very beginning of the presentation, Michael, I think I heard you say something about reducing the number of required bicycle spaces. Did I hear that correctly? Can you explain that?
Yes. You did hear that correctly. This building is quite large. And the way that the zoning works is it requires a specific number of bike parking spots per gross square foot of the building. And when you get to a building of this size, when you run the math, it turns out that you need a little bit over 200 parking spots for bikes, which, it takes up a tremendous amount of space. But what we found is that no one really uses it. So we actually have a bunch of other buildings of similar size across New York City. And we found that those all had bike rooms of about 100 spaces. And they were well used, but not really at capacity. And so we thought that reducing the bike parking space at this project to about 100 also made sense, considering both that experience and the fact that we're very well serviced by public transportation here at this site.
Thank you. EJ.
Yeah, thanks, Leila. Michael or John, whoever might be most appropriate for answering this question. You covered a lot of new transit space, transportation improvements and pedestrian spaces and connections, and particularly as it relates to this second story pedestrian area. I'm wondering if this EIS scope will include in it any potential improvements or new pedestrian spaces on the viaduct and/or any connections between the viaduct and any other pedestrian spaces with your second-story terrace here.
I'm gonna say not as of yet. This is something that we're still exploring, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
That potential exists, clearly. We've created public access to that level. That's kind of as far as we've gotten.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Is that going to be part of the evaluation of the environmental impact statement?
Well, Nancy, if you're on, you would know better, but I think not.
Yeah, I mean, right now the draft scope of work that's been posted on the website does not include that. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Nancy Goshaw, you have a question, go ahead.
I don't know if this is the time to ask, but where are you planning on putting your mechanical space? Is it too soon to ask?
So it's over the lobby.
How high is that space from floor to floor? Do you know yet?
Probably at least 20 feet. Luke, do you have any idea?
The mechanical spaces, yes, 20 feet, but the lobby will be much taller than that, if that was your question.
So it's 20 feet. I have another question on the AD.
The mechanical floors will be 20 feet.
Do you have mechanical floors further up in the building as well?
Yes.
What floor to floor heights are those?
So the building is still very much in development at this point. So final location of those and dimensioning of those is still under development.
Okay. Then the next question I have is the ADA elevator that you're adding. Who will maintain that ADA elevator? Do you know?
For those that are taking people down to the subway, they will be maintained by the MTA. For those that are taking people up to the public realm on the second level, we will.
Okay, the reason I ask is, I know this is a question, is would it be possible to add a second ADA elevator because they always are going into disrepair, and if there was two of them, one, we would be more assured that one would always be in use. Is that possible?
We do have two.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. But
So
no,
Nancy, the way to address this at this level would be to actually ask that accessibility be fully studied.
Okay, right.
Taking into account the fact that very often elevators and escalators break down, and that we have to factor this into the number of such equipment to be allocated to provide constant ADA accessibility to all the areas.
Well said. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, members of the committee? Any more questions? I have a few of my own. I'll start with the first one. The one comment that I did not fully understand was that you mentioned that there's going to be an action to LPC as to the harmoniousness to Grand Central Terminal. Can you elaborate on that? Because this is not part of the East Midtown text. So are you using a part of the zoning text that is beyond East Midtown?
All right, I'll start. Well, the building is actually sort of plugging into Grand Central Terminal on that ground level where we're doing the transit hall. So that's one area of interest, in particular on the part of the State Historic Preservation people, SHPO. And then outside our building actually touches at the ground level that I mentioned. And so that's an interest of both SHPO and landmarks. And then because we're on the same block as a landmark, I think the LPC needs to issue a harmonious relationship certificate for the overall project. Is that right, Michael?
John, if I could answer that a little bit more, it's David Karnofsky from Fried Frank. The East Midtown text actually does provide in the provision that relates to the transfer of floor area from landmarks that if the distribution of floor area is to a site that is adjacent to, contiguous to Grand Central, a harmonious relationship report is required from LPC. And while we'll be making the distribution of floor area in a slightly different way, we are maintaining that requirement to go to LPC and obtain that determination.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So just to go one step further and make sure I fully understand, you're not using a 74-711 article, are you?
No, the way that the floor area will be distributed is across the zoning lot boundaries because I think Michael mentioned this, that the qualifying site here consists both of the Grand Central lot and the Commodore Hyatt lot. Together they form the qualifying site, so the floor area will distribute over the zoning lot lines, and in connection with that there will be this harmonious relationship report.
Okay, so that was going to be my second question. Is that to say that you're doing a lot merger and therefore it does not qualify or read as a transfer of right?
It is for purposes of East Midtown zoning, it's the functional equivalent of a zoning lot merger. They won't actually be merged, but they'll be treated for purposes of East Midtown requirements as a single qualifying site.
So my next question to that point, does that mean that you're exempt from contributing to the East Midtown Fund?
No, in connection with that distribution of floor area from Grand Central of the unused floor area, there will be the very same payment that would have been required if we had used the existing mechanism. So there will be no change. The payment will be made.
Okay. So what is the benefit to proceeding the way you're proceeding?
The benefit is essentially that when you look at this as a single qualifying site, you have the ability to generate through the special permits for transit improvements and for public realm improvements significantly greater amounts of floor area and therefore significantly greater improvements.
I'm not sure I follow that, but
if you look at lot 30 alone and the Commodore site alone and apply the bonus rates to that site alone, the amount of bonus floor area and therefore the size of the improvements is significantly smaller than if you generate it from a larger lot, a larger qualifying site. That's the essence of it.
Now I understand. Okay. I will re-explain that for members of the committee who may not have grasped the full impact of what was just said. Okay, moving on. Can you actually just clarify again the amount of sidewalk widening that you're proposing? You said 5 feet. Does that apply only to Lexington Avenue, or does that also apply to 42nd Street?
The 5 feet, is that right, Luke? 5 feet on Lexington?
Yeah, 5 feet on Lexington, and you'll be set back also on.
And then on 42nd Street, where we are setting back, but the setback is occupied largely by these civic staircases that take you up to the public space on the second level.
Okay. And then my final question is, there used to be a street actually between the terminal and the hotel that has been demapped. Does that become part of your development?
So Layla, I think you're referring to Depew Place, which runs north-south from 45th Street south towards the project site. Right now,
didn't it wrap around? Wasn't it a sort of like inverted L shape passageway or street that was demapped?
It runs north-south essentially, and it's not part of the development site.
Oh yeah, so it does run north-south.
Yes, but it is not. Its lot area is not. It is not part of the development site. It is part of the qualifying site.
Okay, but you're not developing it.
No, it is not being developed. It is being used as it is used today for deliveries and other support services.
Okay, but you're just incorporating it into the qualifying site.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just make one point? The loading and servicing for this building, which we didn't mention, will continue to take place off that Depew alley, which is what the Commodore Hotel, which is what the Grand Hyatt Hotel uses today. So that will remain unchanged, and you will never see the servicing for this building because it's tucked away in that back alley.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that wraps up most of the questions I had. I see that Mike really has a question. Mike, go ahead.
Hi. I saw there was a lot about the 456 mezzanine. Is there any plans for the 7 train and connections to the 7 train?
Michael, wasn't that going to be kind of a second shortcut phase that the MTA was interested in pursuing?
Yeah, that's true. So as part of this short loop that we discussed earlier, we worked with the MTA to develop a phase 2 of this. And that phase 2 would kind of take this arrow that points at the 456 mezzanine, and it would create a new hallway that would connect down towards and into the 7 line station, which is much further below ground. So this improvement here will be done as part of the improvement shown on the screen will be done as part of our project and our transit improvements. And it's being constructed in a way that will allow for that future phase 2 to be constructed by the MTA or by, a different developer also seeking transit improvement rights in East Midtown.
Okay, thank you. And will that second phase then meet all the qualifications for the Hudson Yards mitigation that was cited during the environmental impact of Hudson Yards, that there should be more access from Grand Central Terminal to the 7 train?
I can't answer that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll admit I don't know.
All right.
But once again, Mike, I think it's very important that we ask that to be studied in the environmental impact statement, and that it becomes part of the proposal. So very important
Okay.
comment, very important to make sure it makes its way into our recommendations, and that becomes part of the scope.
But I would like to point out in this image that the increased traffic flow coming from these commuter lines into the 456 station, which is represented by this red arrow, that increased demand is being accommodated by the removal of all the turnstiles, which are now exactly in that location. So we've taken all those turnstiles upstairs, and all of this area in the mezzanine below is now available for circulation to handle this increased demand coming from the commuter connections.
Okay, thank you. As we are on this slide, I'm not sure if you're done with your questions, Mike, but I have a follow-up to this particular slide. Can you just clarify for us? So these improvements will be done at your expense, or will that be shared cost with MTA?
These are being done at our expense. And I should also point out that the new subway entrance over on Lexington Avenue is not something that we are getting any bonus for, because the MTA had sort of recently reconstructed that staircase over there. We had to relocate that, as I mentioned, because of the setback that we're creating on Lexington Avenue. So we won't be getting any bonus for that improvement, but we'll be paying for it, obviously. That one's on our dime.
Okay, thank you. My last question is, do you have any opportunity, and are you required to do any work on the train shed? I think you're south of it, so I'm not totally sure where it starts, but does that have any connection with the train shed?
No, we're clear of the train shed.
Okay. Sorry. Any more questions from members of the committee? Any more questions? No. Okay. Let's open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public, do you have any questions or comments to this proposal and for the applicant? Once again, I will reiterate that we're really discussing the scope of this proposal and what should be studied and assessed in the environmental impact statement that will be prepared for the review of this proposal. Any questions or comments from members of the public?
If you're joining us from a phone, you can press *9 to indicate you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions, comments? Okay, so seeing none, we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to speak, which means that attendees, members of the public, are no longer allowed to speak, but that also applies to the applicant. I just want to make that clear, given that the previous applicant got a little confused. If we have clarifying questions, I will allow it, because those are, this is a very important presentation. And if we need to clarify any specific point, I will allow it. But otherwise, we are in business session. Members of the committee are going to make comments, and we're going to make a motion. So let's start. Who would like to make the first comment, members of the committee, on this important proposal? You can use the raise hand function. We do need comments. If you don't make comments, I will call on you. I see a hand up. Yeah, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, just for everybody's information, the MetLife building, which is a great example of the brutal architecture of the airline industry taking over Grand Central, that's 800 feet tall, roughly 800 feet tall. The Chrysler building, which is directly across the street from this plot, is 1,000 feet tall. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. and one of New York's finest landmarks. This building, as proposed with the additions to it, is going to be 1,600, twice as tall as the MetLife building. I just want everybody to keep that in mind as they're thinking over this proposal, and the way that the cantilevering over the existing airspace is just, for me, another example of the brutality of some architecture that just grabs and takes as much space as humanly possible. The mezzanine looks beautiful. Why can't the building just be 800 feet tall? That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dave. So I think that, let's keep in mind that we're really commenting on the scope. So I think that as this comment relates to the scope, we should make sure that the visual corridors, the vista corridors, the views onto the other landmarks, especially the Chrysler Building, are assessed in this environmental impact statement. And also, I think the access to air and light needs to be properly assessed, and needs to meet the minimum requirement of the code. There should be no exemption and no variance given. And I think that, Dave, you have a point. This cantilevering, sort of like tapering out shape may have a negative impact here. Mike, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment if the 7 train improvements are in phase 2, that we would ask that the phase 2 be incorporated into this environmental impact statement instead of waiting for another process.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. EJ.
I think I might make a similar comment about pedestrian connections to things that are currently under consideration, like improvements to the viaduct. We know that they're being considered. It might make sense if they were included within the scope of the of this EIS instead of being punted to a later phase. Certainly when they're being considered, but that's just one suggestion or caveat. In general, I think the all-encompassing scope to all of the new transit access and transit improvements is appropriate. As you said, air and light and view corridors, I think definitely need to be in scope as well.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that members of the committee understand what it means that they're going to seek an approval for the definition of the qualifying site as being one qualifying site with the terminal and the Hyatt. So if you remember your arithmetics classes, the FAR is a ratio, okay? So it's a proportion of a fixed number. So the way that the text works is that if you do a transit upgrade, you get a 3 FAR, an additional 3 FAR. So floor area ratio is basically the square footage of the base of your lot multiplied by a multiplier. So if the base of your lot is, the narrow size of the footprint of your tower, then, your base number is fairly small. What the applicant is proposing is that although they're not doing a lot merger, but because they are adjacent to the terminal and because they own the terminal or they own the air rights, or maybe they don't, and you actually the ownership is kind of irrelevant here, but they're proposing that the qualifying site becomes the entire footprint, including the terminal itself. And therefore, your base numeral is that much greater. So when you multiply that amount of square feet by 3, you can see that you gain a tremendous amount of added density, and certainly much more than if the qualifying site was strictly the site where the hotel is going to be constructed. So I would be really inclined to actually have a study of the action as it would pertain only to the side of the tower. And I think that should be evaluated as an alternate development in the EIS, because I believe that the East Midtown rezoning did identify the site as being a potential development site. So it was not a development site for sure. And they had anticipated that it would reach a 23 FAR. I believe that this particular proposal would reach a 30 FAR. And depending on how you calculate it, it could actually be even more. So I think that we should ask that a alternate development be studied with only the footprint of the tower as being the base for the calculation. Okay, any other comments on the scope that you feel should be included? Anything about the use? So currently it is a hotel. The hotel is going to remain in a different form, and there's going to be an influx of office space. Any concern? Do we have any concerns about displacement of particular businesses, displacement of particular type of employees? Anything that we want to flag for that? I'll start with Mike. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up. The current Grand Hyatt Hotel has about 60,000 square feet of event space, ballrooms, meeting rooms, and things like that. And food and beverage employees are very labor intensive for a hotel. So I don't think I saw any plans for any similar, I know it's not going to be the same amount, but any similar amount of meeting event space or any kind of food and beverage inside the hotel that's a similar proportion to the existing Grand Hyatt. So I don't know if that could be studied.
We can ask that as becoming part of the scope and really flagging that as a socioeconomic impact. Very good point. I saw another hand up. I think that Dave Achilles, you had another comment.
Well, yes, one more comment. The plan as it stands is a great plan. The subway definitely needs work around there. It just seems to me the trade-off for one of the tallest buildings in Manhattan, for providing what the city needs anyhow and what any decent developer would do in the course of events. It seems to me like a huge trade-off from what is it, from 1,100 feet to 1,600 feet for just doing what any good developer would do with the subway system in this particular case. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other areas of concern in a environmental impact statement are landmarks and other historic resources, the social economic impact, which we touched upon, transit, access to air and light, parks. So let's touch briefly upon this notion that the open space would not be at grade, but would be elevated and would be encroached upon by restaurants and other commercial structures. Do we want to flag that in the environmental impact statement? The requirement is that in exchange for this development, the developer has to provide 10,000 square feet of publicly accessible space. So currently the space is not at grade. Is it something that we want to flag as being of concern and should be evaluated in the EIS?
I would say yes.
Okay, and any other, do we have consensus on that? I see some heads shaking. Nancy, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Nancy.
Yeah, accessibility to that second level is really important. So we need to make sure that it's accessible for everyone, including elderly who don't normally climb. How many steps? That's a very long staircase. And so there needs to be elevators available to the disabled and elderly so that they can enjoy that park space.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think we can put that in the accessibility buckets. EJ.
No, I just second that. I think it should definitely. I think the accessibility should definitely be studied. The number of points of access, should be measured, and their capacity per hour to make sure that it doesn't become like a unreachable sky deck, but that the intended number of pedestrians can actually access it easily, and as was mentioned, accessibly.
Yeah. Nancy, you have your hand up again.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I have a concern about that second level outdoor space. Will there be some sort of security there? Because if it's down on street level, you have street level passersby and pedestrians who keep these spaces fairly active. It seems to be more remote, and that has a concern. So there's going to have to be some sort of security, 24/7 security, to make sure that that it is that it's safe, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the issue that I have with the space. I think that theoretically it's a great idea. In practice, I always get nervous when I hear the word, it has to be activated, because activation in our realm means, giving it away for commercial use, which defeats the purpose of having an open space, publicly accessible open space. And if we're creating an open space that is not publicly accessible, or that is not publicly desired because it is deemed unsafe without, giving it away, turning it away to a private operator, then I think we have failed. So, I think maybe in the parks section of the EIS, we should flag that the space has to remain public, open, safe, inviting to all. Without having to be in the know. I mean, how would people even know that there's a park on the second level of this building? It's I think once again it's a great idea, but we need to make sure that the execution of the idea reaches its goal. It would be terrible to end up with a failed area that is unsafe and uninviting, and who knows what other aspects need to be studied. Is there going to be a wind corridor that will make it totally unusable because it will be so windy and cold? So I think we need to make sure that the scope addresses those concerns. Julie.
Since we're on the topic of accessibility for the public space, I'm wondering if it's appropriate to ask for public bathrooms for this project. It's a lot of FAR, and Midtown's getting denser and we don't have enough public bathrooms. I don't know if this would be an appropriate ask.
Yeah, absolutely. The One Vanderbilt Tower has a public bathroom. As you know, our borough president, Gail Brewer, was absolutely adamant, and she actually raised hell and she made it happen. I actually had the privilege of visiting the bathroom. It's amazing. And I think it's a real, it is a true public amenity. I know that people can be a little, nonchalant about, and there are other, actually in Midtown, it is really critical. So I think that we should add that as, becoming part of the scope for the park area. Aaron, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So it definitely second the issues on the public space. I think that is a concern. My other comment is that the density that this building is going to do on one of the busiest intersections in the world, I think is understated. And I look, there's the transit improvement is great, but the reality is that not everyone who's going to be working in this building is going to be coming from Grand Central. So we've got to look at the pedestrian impact on those intersections, the buses, the people. There's going to be people who drive into the city who work in that building. So the impact on the density in this sort of now mixed use commercial plus hotel is astronomical. And I think that and again, one of the busiest corners in the world, that needs to be really studied, because I do think that's a concern that's not just alleviated by updating the subway platform, especially in a prolonged potential future pandemic. People are not going to be using mass transit for periods of time. I think that should be a concern here. The viability of that project, I think, comes into question, but that's not our issue.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important, and I think that this project needs to be assessed in conjunction with other developments that either are about to come online or are in the pipelines, and that includes, obviously Vanderbilt, One Vanderbilt, which is on the other side of the terminal, but also the MTA building that is slated for redevelopment. And other projects in East Midtown that are coming online, including the JP Morgan Chase redevelopment. Of additional sidewalk is even going to make a dent, given the amount of density that this building is going to bring. So I think it's very important to properly study it and certainly to flag it so that it's fully within the scope. Very good point. Other comments on this project? Anybody else would like to make any comments? Any areas of concern that we have not yet talked about? Nancy.
Okay, this is really to whomever is going to be writing our comments on the EIS. We're gonna be doing, our board is going to be doing some sort of response, right, to the scope. Yes, at some point. Right. So I think we have one that we did for One Vanderbilt, and people could look at that and build on that. That's a really great document. I don't know when we're going to be doing that, but that's a good document to start with. It did produce a lot of things that we wanted. And so I think that whomever is writing these, our own response can certainly build on that. And that may not be yet, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows we have that available.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very, very good point. All right. I think that we've touched on most of the areas that we are concerned with. I would think that we really need to emphasize the evaluation of impact on air and light. The sky exposure plane, is a great concern. We need to make sure that there's enough light coming onto Lexington Avenue and 42nd Street, because with all this density coming online, it's going to become very, very dark at the street level. Yeah, any thoughts on, so as you know, in an environmental impact statement, it is typical to request a alternate scenario. So not only the no action and with action, but we can also ask for an alternate action. Is there any alternate action that you think should be evaluated, and any specific aspects that we feel should be part of this development? Any public amenity, cultural, educational space that you should be dedicated within the building? Any other public amenity or benefit we believe should be assessed? Any thoughts? Nancy?
Well, this may not be the right location, but the School Construction Authority and the Board of Ed is always looking for educational spaces anywhere they can find them. They're always needing to find places to add seats. So I don't know if this is the right location, but it could be. People could come to work and drop their children off at school and then pick them up at the end of the day.
Yeah, very good one. I mean, we can certainly add it. The study may yield a conclusion that it's not the right location, but I think it's a good idea to flag that. Dave.
Well, once again, we're talking about building one of the tallest buildings, certainly in Manhattan, if not the world, for what it is, and to just plop it right there between Madison Square, between Grand Central Station and the Chrysler Building. We have to think about the density of this building, how huge it is. Perhaps they could give us some of the amenities and make a smaller building. Like I say, what's wrong with a building that's 800 feet tall? Less density, it's going to overwhelm the neighborhood amazingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on a community space or public benefit space? Healthcare, educational, cultural. Okay, so I see no comment on that. So educational space, I agree, it's a good idea. So Nancy, go ahead.
Well, we could always ask for nonprofit performance spaces. I mean, the performing arts industry has been really hit bad by COVID, and in order to bring some of these back, they may have to have inexpensive spaces where they can restart their activities because we are the center of entertainment, and that might be something that could be considered for nonprofit theater arts organizations. Yeah.
Okay, we can phrase it in like mix it with education and performing arts, and ask for that to be assessed. Okay, so I think we have a good list of the areas that we want to comment on. So I don't think that we're really in a position to issue an approval or a denial. We really need to comment on substance on the scope. So I think it will be a resolution with no resolve. It will be just a list of the areas of concern that we want studied as part of the environmental impact statement. And I think this is what we did for One Vanderbilt. It was not really, whether we were in favor or against the scope. It was just, the additional areas that we want to be part of the scope. Is everybody okay? So as a result, I don't think we're going to be taking a vote because we're not really taking a position. We're just basically agreeing that those are the areas we want included in the scope. Is everybody in agreement? I see some thumbs up. Anyone opposed to this way of proceeding? Okay, Seeing none, we will adjourn this matter and move to the next application. And thank you so much to the applicants for a great presentation. All right, so we're moving on to 118 West 28th Street. This is an application for a BSA variance to permit the development of non-conforming 12-story mixed-use